Hi everybody, it's Photographer
and Bubbles,
and we're here today. Obviously you can see we're not out hiking. A couple of reasons. It's New Year's Eve. It is about 3 degrees outside and Bubbles has a case of bronchitis. So we figured we'd try something a little bit different today and show you guys how we make our own homemade dog food for our kids. Decided to switch to the diet that we do now is because of our dog Brat. A few years ago was diagnosed with cancer and he was put on a chicken and rice diet, and around that same time is when there was a lot of dog food recalls, and it wasn't just the cheap brands, it was also the premium dog food. That really got us, kind of concerned and thinking about our dog. So we decided we want to know exactly what's in their food, and the easiest way for us to do that is to make it ourselves.
So let's start talking about actually what's in the recipe. And again, this is the recipe we use. Your research and figure out what works best for your dogs. None of our dogs have any allergies that we're aware of or that they've shown. So this recipe works really well for us. You might have to change it to best suit your pets. So the main ingredients of our recipe, first we start off with brown rice, and again we try to use organic wherever we can. Don't go out of your way to find all organic, but if it's on sale, if it makes sense, go ahead and pick up organic. It just enables you to, again, know exactly what's in your dog's food. So we start with brown rice, sweet potatoes, whole chicken, bones, skin, all giblets, everything. Then we use coconut oil ourselves. You can also use olive oil. Either one is very good. We like using the organic, or we like using the coconut oil. There's some research out there about antibacterial properties, anti-inflammatory properties. It's also good for their skin and coat. Whole, plain yogurt, and you can use regular yogurt or Greek yogurt as well. It doesn't matter. Mostly that's for the protein and some of the probiotics that are within yogurt. Whole eggs, whole raw eggs, and we'll show you what to do with those when we actually get into making it. Pumpkin, all natural, regular pumpkin. Make sure you don't get pumpkin pie filling. You just get regular pumpkin. And then the vegetables are spinach, cut or sliced carrots, peas, and green beans. And what we try to do whenever we can, we always try to get the low or no added sodium cans. So after 24 hours and maybe about an hour or so to let the crock pot cool down from the scalding temperature it started at, now you're ready to start breaking down everything and mixing it all together. A few things that you're going to want to have kind of set up here is obviously your crock pot after 24 hours with the cooked chicken, sweet potatoes, and brown rice. Get a good pair of tongs to help you break down the chicken. You're going to want to get the biggest bowl that you have. This one came from IKEA, and it's the largest kind of mixing bowl that they sell there. This thing is great. We can fit all of the ingredients in this bowl and have room to mix it up for one batch of this food. And then you're also going to want to have a blender on hand. After 24 hours in the crock pot, the chicken bones become essentially very soft. You can actually break them apart with your hands. They just turn to mush. What I usually do is put them in the blender and blend them up along with the eggs, which I'll show you in a second. And that gives them all the good nutrients from the bones and the bone marrow, and you know, it makes a nice addition to the recipe. So with that, let's go ahead and start breaking down the chicken. So usually what I do with the chicken is I start with the big bones that I know are in there, and I go for the thighs. And you use your tongs to help break down, get the big bones out, and add that to your blender. And don't worry about your blender. These bones are soft enough. You're not going to break your blender by grinding up these bones. You still want to make sure that you get the bones. Again, if you don't have to be as cautious, trust me. If so, you can see how easily those things just crush. Make sure you get the long bones. There's your thigh and leg bones. There's about 3 bones in the wings that you wanna get. And these are the big ones to make sure that they get broken down. But again, if your dog did get one, it's just they just mush apart. So your dog is gonna be able to chew them up. These aren't like partially cooked bones that are gonna actually get lodged in your dog's throat. You can see how easily those things mush up. Any bone that you see, just add to the blender. Start mushing up all the meat. Any bones that you find, again, just add those to the blender. You have quite a few vertebrae in there. If the giblets and the neck was in there, I just usually add those to the blender. And that's about it for the bones. Once you do this a few times, again, you'll start learning chicken anatomy, and you'll know which bones that you got you didn't get. So after that, usually what I do is try to loosen up as much of the rice in the crock pot as you can. And once you got all that loosened up, be careful if it's still hot. You're going to want to have a oven mitt and dump that into your main mixing bowl. All right, there we go. All right, so now we're ready to blend up the already softened bones after 24 hours. Again, these things just mush in your hand. And you want to mix up the softened bones with 6 eggs, and we use just raw eggs, shells and all. Stick that in there. Break them up a little bit. Depending on your blender type, this is a pretty powerful blender. What I usually do is break up the eggs a little bit so it gets the moisture down into the bottom where the blades are, and so when you go to turn it on, it doesn't get stuck. And then just blend it. Alright, after about a minute or so of blending, you have the best protein shake on the planet.
Yeah.
And just dump that into the mix, the good parts out of it. And that's it for the bones and eggs. Okay, so now we have the complete broken down chicken. What's the soup mixture, so to speak, of the sweet potato, the cooked sweet potatoes, and brown rice, and we have the ground up bones and eggs all in the mixing bowl so far. So next comes adding your oil. Again, you can use olive oil or coconut oil. Again, we like using the coconut oil. And we put about a cup in here. You don't have to be precise. Just kind of what we usually do is just eyeball it out of the container. And that's good. I'm assuming that's about a cup. If this is still warm, your coconut oil will just melt in there. You don't have to worry about it. If if it's cold for some reason, you can always melt the coconut oil before you add it. And then the next thing to add is you want to add half of a 2-pound container of whole milk yogurt. And again, this can be Greek yogurt as well. What we like to do is we always use the whole milk, not the non-fat, because you want to give them the fat from it. Chicken in itself is not that fatty, even though we're adding all the skin and everything with it. But the extra fat coming from the whole milk yogurt is not a bad thing, and the calcium. So again, about a half a container of that, and we just save that for next time. And then the next ingredient to add is the 1 15-ounce can of all natural pumpkin. Make sure you get actual pumpkin and not pumpkin pie mix.
Okay, so once you have all the good stuff in there, it's time for the veggies. And so what we're going to do is add all that to it. So if the vegetables are in a can, you definitely want to drain them, and then if for the frozen spinach, you want to thaw that out in a container too. But for the frozen veggies in a bag, you can just add those right in frozen. You don't need to thaw those out. And then I have my carrots and spinach in another. So this is the thawed out spinach, just drained it because that has a lot of water, and then we rinsed the carrots. All that good stuff in there. Did I get everybody? And then you just really want to make sure that it's all well combined. So just kind of methodically kind of go through and just stir it. It's a really good arm workout too. So, I mean, as you can see, like I said, you can eat this if you really wanted to. So we know exactly what's in here. There's nothing artificial. There's no fillers. There's no chemicals.
All right, so now that we got everything mixed up, all the goodies have been added to it, time to put it in our storage containers. We cook this every 4 days for our dogs, and we break it up into these 8-cup containers. And one of these containers lasts about 1 day for our dogs. So we usually get 4 or 5 containers out of the batch, and so it lasts us every 4 or 5 days. If you need to freeze this because you have fewer pets, it freezes really well. Just make sure you get it out at least a couple days in advance and thaw it out in the fridge, because the stuff, for some reason, it really holds on to the cold, and it takes a really long time for this stuff to thaw out. So last thing to talk about is the serving size for your dogs. And we feed our dogs based on weight, and we feed them roughly about 3.5% of their body weight per day. For instance, Nala weighs about 40 pounds. 3.5% of her body weight is about 22 ounces, so we feed her roughly 11 ounces twice a day, and Betty Boop gets just over 2 ounces per meal. And to make that real easy, we use a food scale, and we measure out each and every dog's serving size for breakfast and for dinner.